Hi, thanks for watching. There's a special interview with Vance Harwood coming up on the show right now. So check it out. Thanks to all of you who've contributed a couple of these holiday cameos. Much appreciated. And we will see you all in the new year. I will be coming out with a position update pretty soon in the next day or two because we have started another position in VXX. So stay tuned for what that position is, and we'll talk about that more as we come into the work week. But for now, check out my interview with Vance Harwood. All right, so I thought that I should bring an expert on to answer some of these viewer questions because I keep getting all these viewer questions. So by the magic of Skype, we have back by popular demand to the Short Vol Show from a year ago, or maybe even longer, Vance Harwood. Vance, welcome back to the show.
Oh, great to be here.
Awesome. So by the magic of the internet, we're in the same room, but where are you actually right now?
I'm in Erie, Colorado.
All right. Nice. Is there snow on the ground out there yet?
Yes, there is. Yeah, we've had a couple storms. The skiing is pretty good. I hear. I haven't been up there yet, but I hear it's pretty good.
Nice. Yeah, you got to get the boards out and go up there and
get
the slopes a little bit. Do you still ski sometimes?
Sometimes, yeah.
Nice.
I do.
So we're ending up the year. So this is kind of like we have to kind of do a year-end summary of the world of volatility and the VIX this year. It has been it's been an interesting year. Not really what I expected, but much calmer than last year. It seems like.
Yes, 2018 was pretty turbulent. You know, the big spike at the end of 2017, and then when you get people that nervous, it takes a while for volatility to settle back down. But 2019, you know, in retrospect, there was fairly quiet.
Yeah, it seems like the market really has climbed a wall of worry this year. The whole time we've been rallying, like it seemed like every news report was negative, like we're coming into recession, this bad thing can happen, we're definitely going lower, and it seems like that has almost like that scenario has propelled the market higher, like the fear of people to stay long.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there's I think one of the advantages of the correction in December of 2018 was you know, it'd been so long since we'd had a 20% correction that people were very nervous. So I think that released some of the fear of, well, you know, this time around we have contagion with the volatility complex, those sorts of things. And when that didn't happen, then I think that made people a little less gun shy.
Yeah, I've heard these stories that a lot of people have been still kind of gun shy to actually short volatility, and thus a lot of people have kind of missed this down move because they were kind of like they'd short it for a couple of days, then they bail out, and you know that fear of another spike has been in the forefront of people's minds, and it has like made it difficult for them to put a position on that rode this down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unless you have a pretty analytic sort of approach to things where you have kind of predetermined thresholds, you know, emotionally you're always hearing both sides of the story. So I think there's never going to be a consensus one way or the other. So I think you know, one approach to that is just be more analytic about the entry points.
Hey, David. So hopefully you're doing well, enjoying the holiday season. I just wanted to wish you and your family a Merry Christmas and give you a big thank you for all the great work you did for the short volatility community this year. I don't think people fully appreciate how difficult it is to make all those videos, especially at the rate that you do. But it's important work, and we all very much appreciate it. You're taking difficult concepts and breaking them down in ways that your community can understand, and no doubt help them navigate more safely and profitably as well. So I'm a big fan of the show, I'm a Patreon, and I can't wait to see what you have in store for all of us in 2020. So from me to you, and to all those loyal Short Vol Show followers out there, Merry Christmas.
A lot of people have been asking me about the contango levels we've seen over the last couple months. They say, you know, why do I keep posting about it? What is the significance of contango as far as these products, VXX, UVXY, and whatnot? And they also are saying, well, why is it so high right now? And I certainly have my suspicions, but how would you explain to somebody, if somebody saw me posting, well, contango is this right now, how would you explain to somebody like what contango does or what its effect is on these products?
Okay. So as most people probably know, contango is a term that's associated with the term structure. So in this case, it means as you look out in time, there's various data points, and the shape of those data points is what we call the term structure. So if the short-term data point is low and you have increasing points, that is called contango. If it's the other way around, where the short-term stuff is high and then you see a decreasing profile, then that's called backwardation. So when the markets are calm, volatility will be in contango. So that means that if you want to buy protection further out, either with SPX options or VIX futures or those sorts of things, there's a higher premium associated with that. So contango is the definition of that shape of the curve, where you have a climbing curve over time. So in terms of contango, I think you can think of it in two ways. One is it's a good signal, a good indicator, because if the market is in strong contango with this steep rising curve, then it's pretty unlikely that you'll have a big equity blow off. You should start to get worried when contango starts to flatten out. And one measure of that that's pretty convenient is the VIX over the VIX3M ratio. So if you take that ratio, right now that's running like 0.8, but right before the February 5th crash in 2018, that was running above 1. So my rule of thumb is whenever that ratio is higher than, say, 0.95, it's time to be very cautious with short volatility. You probably should be hedged or out if it gets much above that. So that's contango as an indicator. The other aspect of contango is as a measure of how much the long volatility funds are going to be eroded over time and how much the inverse funds are going to be going up over time.
This is David Modell, and I want to wish everybody a happy holiday. Thanks everybody for watching the Short Vol Show live.
Well, I get corrected a lot of times. For a long period of time, I was explaining it to people as sort of every day these funds sort of are rebalancing their futures, and these funds being made of VIX futures of the front 2 months that are trading that average out to a 30-day an average of 30 days out till the future expires. And a lot of times when I've explained it as, well, every day they're selling a little bit of the near month and buying a little bit of the far month to keep that 30-day exposure, people have come back to me and said, well, actually, what people are doing is they're making markets around an index, and they're not really rebalancing every day. And it's confusing to me because when I look at the ProShares website, I will see their holdings of front month futures go down every day and their holdings of the next month going up. So it's hard for me to understand, is it people making markets around the index, or is it actually this process of buying and selling futures? It's also confusing because you see the swaps on there too, which adds an extra layer of confusion to it. Right.
So actually, the right answer to that is actually a third way. Is the reason that you see the contango, say in VXX or TVIX or UVXY, is that, as you say, they're holding these front month futures, first and second month, and if the term structure is in contango, they're actually dropping towards the VIX. So both that first month and second month future, if you're in contango, are both dropping essentially a little bit every day. It's sometimes it's hard to see that because you have the VIX jumping up and down, but over time, over a week, over a month, the fact that both of those futures is declining is what's causing the erosion of those funds.
Yeah, sometimes I like to explain it to people that there's a sort of kind of gravity pulling these these futures towards spot, and most times it seems like gravity because they're going down towards spot, but the rebalancing is allowing some of those futures to be reset again at a little higher place so that they can keep having farther to fall towards spot. And so the rebalancing kind of creates this almost like perpetual motion system where like you're always falling towards spot, but you never quite get there in a sense.
Yeah, I think it'd be easy to overemphasize the rebalancing as a factor. It's true that these funds do need to shift their assets. So because a future is expiring over time, you can't just buy a future and hold it because it'll expire. So you have to have a rolling strategy. So the strategy that's used is approximately 5%, since there's approximately 21 trading days in a month. So about every trading day, about 5% of the holdings in the front month get rolled into the second month. But I think where a lot of people get confused is they think that that's what I would call a lossy transaction, that somehow you're losing money in that transaction. A better analogy is you're changing coins. It's like you're changing a dime for 2 nickels. So the economic impact of that rebalancing is zero. So I think a lot of people get confused about that.
This is Artie Lang. Best of luck. Best of luck with your show, Dave. This is Artie Lang saying best of luck. All right. I want to get that right because I appreciate you thinking of me. Otherwise, happy holiday. Peace. Love you. Keep up the good work.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about is just, and we went over this once before a long time ago, but I forget kind of the answer, and maybe you could just clarify it a little bit, is this thing where you'll come in on a Monday morning and everything will be unchanged, but the VIX is always a little higher. Right. And same thing on Friday afternoons, like the market will be like unched and the VIX will be lower than, if you're following it closely, it'll kind of seem like it's lower than it should be. And I know that has something to do with the formula, but can you explain that to me again, why that works that way?
Actually, I wrote a blog post about that in Six Figure Investing. It's called, the overall title is called, Is the VIX Broken? But that's one of the things I go into in quite a bit of detail. It's really not, well, I guess it really is driven by what the market makers are doing with as they're selling options. And the situation is that they don't want to be experiencing theta delay over the weekend. So they have an inventory of options. There's no buying and selling, but there's less time to expiration when the market opens. So I think the most logical explanation for this is that they're adjusting the prices of SPX options Friday afternoon, basically preconditioning for that drop off. And then when things open in the Monday as you open, typically the prices themselves are unchanged, but because there's less time to expiration, the formula translates that as an increase in the VIX.
That makes a lot of sense to me because I remember being a market maker in the pit. If it was like a 3-day weekend or something, like on Friday afternoon, we'd set our auto quote to like, we'd slowly start moving it. We'd set it to Saturday maybe, then Sunday, and then Monday, because we don't want to get caught holding the bag over the weekend on some of this stuff.
Right. So. Yeah, because if you look at the futures, they don't have that weekend effect because they're obviously not options. So it's an artifact of just the calculations of what the market makers are doing.
A lot of people, I get a lot of emails and also just comments on Twitter of people worried that we're going to be in a situation that we were like in the Volmageddon, or at least what people think we were in the Volmageddon, where like there's just all these people shorting the VIX, and you hear these like hedge funds are all short at the VIX right now. And how can somebody, if I'm just a retail person, is there somewhere I can look to get a handle on like if the trade is lopsided or not? And does that matter? Does that come into play?
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts on all that. I think just at a very high level, before the February 2018 crash, the exchange traded products their assets had really gotten quite large. So they were in the neighborhood of $6 billion, and I think they're around $2 billion now. So what happened on the 5th of February was essentially there was a 5% move on the S&P, and then this got translated into a big move on the VIX, kind of up until closing about what you would expect. But both the long funds and the short funds, the leveraged long and the short funds, have to do not only a rebalance, but also what we call a releveraging. And that's the next day, they continue to match their leverage factors. Well, it turns out that because the assets had gotten that large and the move on the VIX was large enough, is they both long and the short, this is counterintuitive, but both the long products and the short products had to buy a bunch of futures at close. And this was well known, this is public knowledge. And the sellers basically just sat on their hands. They waited for the price to go up, and that's kind of the way markets work. If they know that the buyers are going to be coming in mass and there's not that many sellers, then not surprisingly, the price goes up. So I think that we don't have that level of exposure now. We're probably a third of that, and I think that the CBOE has made a couple of improvements on that. I don't think they're massive. But I think as far as the ETPs go, that risk there is lower. Now, the COT report, the commitments of traders put out by the CFTC, they put out a report too. There's an old legacy one. I just found this out recently, but there's an old legacy one that people usually refer to that shows commercial and non-commercial. Well, it turns out this is really a dumb split. It doesn't make sense for VIX futures. For example, ETPs, exchange traded funds, show up in the retail side, which really doesn't make a lot of sense. So they have another report that's called, let me see, financial futures, traders in financial futures, and that's in a different spot. And it shows that there is more short positions held by the non-market makers, non-exchange traded funds, but it's not in record-breaking territory. It's just relatively high, which is not surprising given the contango we've seen the last 6 months.
Yeah, I was recently ridiculed because I didn't know about the COT report, or I hadn't reviewed it before I came online, and somebody was kind of making fun of me. I think that the sort of narrative that I used to go with was like the pros kind of stick to the SPX options and retail might stick to UVXY or VXX, but we know now that traders are sophisticated. So if a hedge fund or something thinks that they can get more liquidity in VXX or UVXY, they're going to go there. And we see them entering this, it's basically a hot potato of risk and either passing it off to somebody or trying to get some of that risk and acquire it. And it kind of, people can jump in anywhere in the little circuit there sometimes, it seems like. So it's hard to define which is retail and which is professional. It's very blurry at times, I think.
Right. Well, and then I think the other thing is that just because there's a short position, you don't know if whoever is shorting, how much risk the short holder is taking. So are they just only short and no protection? Is this a spread trade where they're short one contract and long another? Do they have protection derivatives like VXX calls or UVXY calls in place? So, or are they balancing against some other resource? So, for example, people with really long horizons, like a pension fund or a real long or insurance company, a lot of times they will do some short vol, but they're looking at a 10-year standpoint, and they're saying, well, we don't even really care if there's a recession. We know eventually that the VIX futures are going to go back to where they were. The VIX will mean revert. So you have that whole spectrum from people that are overexposed short to those that will ride out anything and never panic.
Hey, Dave. So, there's my little kitty. David, come here. We need to talk. What the fuck? You're leaving to go work on your stock market show? You promised you were going to hang out with me. Is there some other girl?
Yeah, that's true. It seems like with when you're analyzing time and sales and anything, you get that, like, you don't know what they're doing against it type thing out there. And I've noticed increasingly when we look just at the VVIX, a lot of times looking at the VVIX lately, if you just glanced at it, you might see how VVIX up. They must be call buyers in the VIX, but lately you dig into time and sales, and it's actually put buyers which are making the VVIX go up. So it's a complex situation out there with all these products, certainly. Now, last time I had you on was with my buddy Andrew G, and we were discussing the expiration, which of course happened earlier today. Can you give us an update on expiration? It seems like there's been less shenanigans lately, but have you noticed anything recently that's changed with expirations?
Well, I agree. It seems like it has been pretty quiet. The CBOE has continued. I don't know if there's been any in the last year, but they've made a series of small tweaks to the algorithm to reduce some of the opportunities there. And I think there was someone that got fined within the last year about attempting to do that, certainly within the last 2 years. So I think the CBOE is very vigilant as far as monitoring that process, and if they do see someone trying to game the system, that they're aggressively going after them. But I think just in general, hanging on VIX options until expiration is a risky thing. There's, you can just have normal overnight moves that could turn a profit into a loss. So I think people should be aware that that's just a risky move to let those things expire.
Well, I have the conversation all the time with people who are trading UVXY or VXX that, look, we might be making a big deal about what's happening to the December future this morning, but for you trading UVXY or VXX, it's pretty moot because that future is pretty much rolled out of the equation for you at this point if you're just trading these ETPs. It's of interest to us, but it's gone. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually the ETPs are completely out of that future when it expires. So they're out the night before. They're completely out of the future that's going to expire. Right.
So it's interesting for us nerds, but if you're trading VIX, VIX options on VIX futures, it's crucial. But for if you're just trading UVXY, don't worry about that stuff because it's gone and out of the equation at that point. Now I have a lot of I have some young new viewers who are just getting started in the VIX, and amazingly, one of my friends he brought a video of mine into his high school class.
Oh, cool.
And I always send people to Six Figures Investing to, just begin their education on the VIX. How would you suggest somebody go about, if they're brand new to the VIX, where should they go on your website just to get started? What should be their path?
Well, I think if they're just getting started, the post, How Does the VIX Work, is a good place to start. I think the other thing is to look at the index. I have a page set up that's just an index, and look at those titles, and that way you can get kind of a big picture and kind of, especially if they have an interest like in dividends or exchange traded funds or those sorts of things. So that was what I would recommend.
What do you think of some of these new products like the Scott Nations products or the MyAx spikes? Are these things that we should be starting to trade now, or are they too young? I know that there's a range of new products out there. Are there any that have piqued your interest?
Well, there's new indexes out there. I think the spikes might have futures and options, I think, but I think the problem is that if you're very similar to the VIX, then it's pretty tough to differentiate yourself. Now, the Vol-I is the index, and I don't know if there's any products available on that, but that has the advantage of, at least it's a different algorithm, and that's looking more at the money volatility. So one of the issues with VIX is that it is impacted by out of the money puts or calls. And so if if you're looking just right at the money, there's typically a premium of the VIX over what you would say the real at the market volatility is. But so far, I don't see anything really taking off in terms of popularity. I like them as indexes just to take a look at them and compare them. So Spike, for example, I believe is based on SPY options, which have an advantage in that their spreads are very narrow, so you have less ambiguity there. But it also has an issue when SPY goes ex-dividend, like it's going to on Friday. The prices on the options get distorted somewhat before that happens, so you have to kind of factor that in.
Yeah, that's interesting. I go on this radio program every once in a while, and I'm always in the MIAX hot seat, and I'm supposed to talk about spikes, and I haven't really involved myself all that much in it yet. I have a lot of viewers who are interested in backtesting, and they're asking me all the time about backtesting data. And I know that you provide some data on your website. Could you talk about that for a second? Because it's something I know very little about.
Well, one of the needs, if you're testing out an algorithm, I think if you're doing a trading strategy, showing that it worked in the past is important, because sometimes you'll have an algorithm, you think it's really cool, you run it on old data and it fails miserably. So if an algorithm fails on old data, then it's pretty unlikely it will start working in the future. The other is not true. If it does work in the past, then there's no guarantee it will in the futures, and oftentimes it doesn't. But I think it's a sanity check. Backtesting is a sanity check. So, for example, people might be interested in as well, how would my algorithms handle VXX over the 2008-2009 crash? It didn't start trading until January 2009, so kind of after most of the fireworks had already happened. So what I do is go back typically and use the VIX futures, which started trading in 2004. I use the same algorithm that's called out in the prospectus of how to roll those futures. So basically, I can project back in time how VXX would have behaved back to 2004. So then you can run your trading algorithms against that and see, would they have handled a 2008, 2009 sort of event appropriately?
And they can select certain years to purchase, or how does it work as far as payment-wise for that sort of information?
The way I have it organized is I have it by product, so they're all basically from 2004 on, and then you can select like VXX or UVXY. So, for example, UVXY right now is leveraged 1.5 times, and that leverage got changed in February 2018. So, if you want to know how that would have behaved in 2015, there's no market data to that, but my simulations can easily do that. So I took the 1.5x leverage UVXY back to 2004. So if you're interested in that product, you can run your backtests on that. And I also have a spreadsheet that has all of the the major ETPs in it, so you can buy it kind of in bulk if you're so inclined.
We've heard rumor of a new kind of XIV type thing, type thingamajigger coming onto the markets. Do you think that's a good idea? Will that catch on? Because I know SVXY now is down to 0.5% leverage, 0.5 times leverage. So we don't have. Obviously, we can replicate with options any sort of leverage we'd like, but for a retail product, for somebody to inversely, buy something that will get them short the VIX, this would be the biggest levered product out there moving forward. But I guess it wouldn't be as much as what we used to have before. But do you think we're going to see more products like that coming out?
Well, I can't speak specifically about the one that's been filed because I have a small interest in it. So it's in SEC blackout time.
Gotcha.
I think just overall, people miss the 1x inverse products. But I think that obviously with the XIV debacle, that people should rightfully be concerned about a product like that.
Yeah, definitely. I just think that it's your and my jobs to educate people on what this stuff is, because as long as people are aware of the risks and understand them, then it's up to them what they want to trade. But my fear is that there were just too many people after that Vomageddon who showed me screenshots of like all their money in XIV with margin also. And that's something that I know people get excited about stuff and they take these risks, but that's just something that we would never suggest anybody do, just for that very reason. So
yeah, my general observation is people seem to have a pretty short memory. So I think if something's been working well for 6 months, and then they kind of, I guess you just have to be burned a few times like I have before you appreciate that. There are major cycles, and also just unexpected things. There was, the move on February 5th was unprecedented, but there was nothing preventing it. And oftentimes it's things we haven't seen before that bite us. From 2004, well, even from the beginning of the VIX in 1990, we hadn't seen anything like the February 5th, 2018 move. But there's nothing that constrains the prices on SPX options or on VIX futures. So there's always an uncertainty there that's effectively not predictable.
Well, VIX is certainly still in its infancy, but I've noticed that it seems like it's becoming more known around the world in the last year. You see it on, certainly on financial media, they're talking about the VIX more, but I'd like to see a VIX class, in every high school. We'll see if we'll see if we get there or not, but that would be a goal for me. All right. Well, listen, I don't want to, I promised you I would keep it short, so I'm going to adhere to my promise. I've already gone, it looks like 35 minutes, so I've broken the promise already, but I always love talking to you so much that I get a little carried away. But listen,
no problem. It's fun.
Have a great, have a great holiday time period. Get out and hit those boards for me, because I'm jealous. I'm stuck here in Massachusetts, far away from any good snow. And everybody check out Six Figure Investing. I will leave links in the description. It's the place where I always send people just to get started, because it's got sections on each of these products that explain it very clearly what's going on here. So it's amazing always to have the the real expert in the room with me. So great to see you, Vance. And
all right.
And we'll see you again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks.
All right. Thanks. And thank you for watching today, and enjoy the rest of your holiday, and we'll see you after the break. And cut. What do you think?
Oh, that was good. Yeah, it was.
Cool. It's been a great year for me as far as just the trading stuff, and I've noticed like a bump in popularity of the channel just because the VIX has been going, just because these products have been going down. So
right.
We always see that when the stuff's going down a lot, people watch, and when it's not, they don't. So do you know? Have you noticed that also, or?
Well, overall popularity, I don't know. I think that certainly the drops in UVXY and TVIX have been dramatic, but it's also interesting there that their assets have held up or even climbing. So I don't know if that's because people are trying to bet on a crash, or if it's just short interest driving the assets. So one of the things I learned about this year is that some of the institutions, they're doing what they call create and lend. So essentially they're buying TVIX or EVXY, hedging it probably with VIX futures, and then just loaning out the TVIX to earn the borrow on the short. So because there's not a XIV type product, people are getting the leverage that way.
So you can't look to I was looking at the notional values of the holdings of UVXY and pointing to that, saying, well, that's proof that there's people buying this still and that it's not one-sided. But what you're saying, I guess, is that that might not be the case. People might be getting long this just to give it to somebody else to short for that borrow rate. Well, the hard to borrow business has always been a murky part of the stock trading world.
Well, I think it's not all that murky. It's just in the sense of, a lot of people are not thrilled about loaning out the stock, and frankly, who wants to buy and hold TVIX? That unless you're just sure there's a crash around the corner, it's brutal. So, I think this makes a lot of sense that a lot of those assets out there are hedged, and so the holders are protecting themselves.
I guess what I mean by murky is that when I was a market maker trying to get long stock, not in one of these products, but in a regular stock, the best customers would get access to the long stock first. You could say, hold me aside 50,000 shares for the day, and if you're a good customer, they would do that. If you weren't a good customer, you couldn't get anything. The borrow rates were different and not published from different, Bear Stearns would have this, these guys would have that, and it was just...
Well, and then you have some of the market makers have some privileges where they can do the naked shorts too. So that is murky, and it seems like the tracking of all that is, they talked about using blockchain type technology for tracking the shorts, which I think would be a really good idea because the tracking part of it I think is problematic. Yeah,
you could have like a quote-unquote Chinese wall between one company that would be long it and the other would short it, and people were shorting it naked and getting around the rules that were put in place and after the 87 crash. So cool. All right, well listen, thanks so much for coming on at short notice. I got a bunch of people to do cameos, so I'm gonna put together a little Christmas show, put a green screen behind me and include this with it. So
sounds
always
good.
Appreciate talking to you. And I've been my channel's been growing slowly, but now, before, if I put a video out, the first 24 hours I get 100 views. Now I put a video out, the first 24 hours I get 250 views. So that's not millions of views, but it's growing. So as long as it's growing, I'm happy.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tweet on it too, so that should give you a little boost when it comes out. So. All
right. Well, thanks again, and happy holidays. And I'll talk to you soon.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.